What's good, everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another weekend discussion. Today, we are talking about the most important game for the Nintendo Switch since the launch of the system. And honestly, this is one of the most important stretches for Nintendo fans of the Nintendo Switch's history. Honestly, I'm not exaggerating on this one. And before we get into all of this and what games I'm talking about and everything, please make sure you hit that like button and also subscribe if you are someone new, as we drop daily gaming videos and also have live streams 6 days out of the week. Now, with that out of the way, let's go in and get right into this. Now, at the most recent Nintendo Direct, Nintendo showed off a slew of games. Now, these weren't the highest profile games in Nintendo's category. There were some missing from what's already been announced, stuff like Bayonetta 3, for example. Obviously, there was no Splatoon. We didn't get any Animal Crossing stuff. There was no big Mario announcements outside of Mario Superstars, the Mario Party Superstars game. But when it comes to the classic Nintendo fan, and when it comes to what you want to see in the future and what I've seen from like the hardcore, the pulse, I would say that this stretch of games is easily one of the most important since the launch of the Nintendo Switch. And allow me to explain. Metroid Dread. I mean, I think just those two words, the Metroid franchise, what you hear online is so much from Metroid fans. They're frustrated, they're upset, they're angry, they're not getting what they want. But aside from that, this type of game, when it comes to Metroid Dread or when it comes to Metroid in general, remember, this is not a massive franchise for Nintendo. The bounty hunter Samus is a very popular character in, like, I would just say the culture of Nintendo fans. Everybody knows of Samus, but when it comes to the actual game sales, that has been a problem. That has been a struggle. No single release Metroid game has ever done better than 3 to 4 million units. So there is a lot riding on this game, and I honestly feel with the concept of Metroid Dread, the fact that you are taking something they've been working on, or at least they were talking about for what, 15 years in terms of making this type of game, and they didn't have the hardware or the ideas, nothing really came together. But finally, after all of this time, it kind of came together. The first 2D Metroid game in nearly 2 decades. This is a very big deal, and I think it's going to shape the future when it comes to what Nintendo could bring back or not. Now, you have to remember here, guys, games take years to plan, sometimes even longer than that. So if Nintendo is going to do something with their other legacy IPs, they will be having the initial planning stages. They will think of an idea and put it together. But I'll say this, the future of the Metroid franchise, especially 2D Metroid, and the future of some of the lesser known video games are definitely somewhat on the line here with Metroid Dread. So I'm very happy to report that Metroid Dread is doing extremely well when it comes to the Amazon sales so far, the pre-order sales. People seem to be snapping up those amiibo, people seem to be snapping up those special editions, and also the regular edition of the game as well. I think pre-orders are going to go well on the eShop as well. So I do think that there is definitely a very good opportunity for Metroid Dread to probably become the best-selling game in the Metroid franchise by a large margin fairly quickly, because no other game has passed that 3 million units on a singular platform. Now, the reason why I'm confident about this as well, outside of what I just mentioned, is the fact that if you look at another game, Fire Emblem, for example, Fire Emblem Three Houses has become the best-selling Fire Emblem game of all time, passing 3.02 million units as of last year. Nintendo hasn't updated the numbers since then, but I'm guessing it's probably like around 3.5 million or so. So that's not bad at all when it comes to Fire Emblem, and once again, the best-selling game in the franchise. It's the Switch effect. The fact that the Switch is such a popular system, the fact that Metroid is an iconic franchise, the fact that we've seen Samus in Super Smash Bros., we've seen her kind of around, she's been hinted at some other things. I know she was in Paper Mario and stuff like that. So it makes sense to me that Nintendo's really pushing this one, and that's the thing that I'm seeing with this. Right after the announcements and everything, Nintendo actually changed the banner and changed the icon on their profile picture on Twitter to Metroid Dread, and they talked about it multiple times. They had multiple segments on the Treehouse Live, and to be honest, if you want to see these type of games continue, you definitely need to go out there and support this type of game when it comes to Metroid Dread, because the quality looks to be very good. I love the seamless blending, especially with boss battles, when it goes from 2D gameplay to where you can go right into 3D and you're shooting missiles at them. It's a very unique hybrid of 2D and 3D type of gameplay. Not 3D in the terms of you actually controlling the character in a 3D space, but 3D in terms of how the dimensions look with the gameplay. So if you watch the Treehouse Live segment, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You guys are going to be seeing it right here. So it's so cool to be able to have this type of game, and I think that the ideas are what makes it really awesome. So Nintendo is really pushing this game. There's no more excuses. That's why I say it's really important, because as much as we like to say, oh, we'll just create games for fun and everyone's just going to be happy for the fans, at the end of the day, it's a business to them, and they need to see substantial amount of revenue coming back in if they're going to spend 3-4 years worth of time and development on a game, because this type of title is not a quick, oh, we're going to develop it in a year or 2 years. This is a title that's going to take a lot of bit of time, money, effort to do. So Nintendo's definitely going to want to see a good return. Otherwise, they're just going to do something else, put that money into something else, or just do whatever, or think of a new IP or something like that. So to me, this is easily one of the most important games since The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild came out, because that was like, hey, the launch of the Switch. What game do you have? What can you use to push this system? Because the Wii U didn't do so well. The 3DS, while it did well, it was definitely fading at that time. So Nintendo needed a hit, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was that. But then the rest of the lineup for the year was also very important. Breath of the Wild was great, and people were going to buy the system for that. But what are you going to do to keep the revenue coming in? What are you going to do to keep people excited about the system in general? So that's what brings me to my next half of what we're going to be talking about here, and that is the rest of the lineup. So once again, if you're a classic Nintendo fan, there are some big things that we need to talk about here when it comes down to it, and there's some very important games. They might not be the biggest games out there for Nintendo, but they're very important. Let's start with the legacy title, which is Advance Wars. Like the fact that this is coming back, once again, ground up remakes, both games there, $30 a piece for $60 on there with Advance Wars, and they got WayForward to help them out with the development of this game. This is very important to see, okay, do people actually want to buy these classic IPs? Do people actually want to pick up some of these games that were in the past? I mean, I definitely feel that if Advance Wars does well, Nintendo will look into hiring WayForward for other projects, maybe for an F-Zero remaster, or maybe for something else. We'll look into some of these smaller companies and get them to start developing some of these other IPs that people have been looking for. I personally feel that if Advance Wars does well, I think we can easily see WayForward get way more projects. I would love to see them get Wave Race. I would love to see them get 1080 snowboarding. I'd love to see them get stuff like that. And I think WayForward is more than equipped to take some of those games and remake them from the ground up and put them out on the Nintendo Switch. So this is another very important game for the core classic Nintendo fans out there that have been asking for these type of old school IPs to come back, because it's been what, almost 20 years since Advance Wars. It's been almost 20 years since the 2D Metroid, and now we're finally getting these games back, and they're coming not necessarily directly from Nintendo with their development power, but from Nintendo helping out with third-party studios, Mercury Steam with Metroid Dread, and also WayForward with Advance Wars. So to me, this is very important to see what's going to happen with these two games as Nintendo reaches out to some of these other developers to have them work on their legacy IP while they develop the big stuff like the Legend of Zelda, or like a new Mario game, or a new Donkey Kong, or Splatoon, or Animal Crossing, and stuff like that. Now, the last game that I want to talk about isn't necessarily a first-party game, but it's a game that Nintendo is helping out a lot with when it comes to distribution, marketing, and all of that, and that is Shin Megami Tensei 5. Now, on the Treehouse Live, they showed off the game. It looks absolutely amazing. Obviously, it's not perfect with every single thing. I watched the Treehouse footage because we were having discussions with that. There's some stuff, there's some pop-in in the background, there's some shimmering and stuff like that, some flickering with some of the shadows and everything, but the game isn't finished. But from what I saw in terms of the gameplay, it's absolutely phenomenal. And if you compare it to most Japanese RPGs on the Switch, it's easily one of the more impressive looking ones out there. So this game is also very important as well, because it is a huge third-party single-player game from Atlas. third-party single-player game from Atlas/Sega. Well, Sega is the publisher when it comes to the parent company. Atlas is the developer. Nintendo will be handling distribution in Europe for this game. So this is a joint collaboration between these three companies. And obviously, people want to see more Atlas games on the Nintendo Switch. People want to see Persona on the Nintendo Switch. Now, I'm not saying that the success of Shin Megami Tensei 5 equals Persona on the Switch. I don't think so, just because the Switch's success itself, I think, would warrant them actually going in there and thinking about doing a port and all of that. Atlas is just extremely slow when it comes to certain things like that, and they're not the best when it comes to porting. We saw that with Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster, which it's still good, but obviously it could have been a little bit better when it comes to the porting from the PS2. But at the end of the day, I still think that people want to see Atlas develop and Sega develop more exclusive stuff for the Switch, or more things to where they actually have Switch in mind. People want to see Radiant Historia. People want to see some of that back catalog of games when it comes to SMT games or stuff being brought over. And this is going to be one of the various different factors that can help out with that. And if this game, if Shin Megami Tensei 5 is an overwhelming success like Monster Hunter Rise has been, there is no excuse from any Japanese company to not instantly start saying, okay, let's go, especially with their Japanese IPs. We see what Bandai Namco's doing. They are scrambling to port their games over to Nintendo Switch. We got two big Bandai Namco games that skipped Switch at launch, which was Ni no Kuni 2 and also Dragon Ball Kakarot. Both of those games were not on Switch at launch with other systems, and now they're being ported over to the Switch, and both of them are coming out this year. So Bandai Namco's struggling and scrambling to kind of catch up because they knew that they messed up not starting the development and getting their systems ready and getting everything ready for the Nintendo Switch. So to me, this would just be like the super nail in the coffin. I mean, the nail in the coffin's already there because of the Switch sales and how it's doing in Japan and some of the third-party games that have done well, Monster Hunter Rise and all that. But now it's like the super double, quadruple nail in the coffin when it comes down to it. So I would love to see SMT5 as a hardcore turn-based RPG. I would love to see that do extremely well. So there's absolutely zero excuses. I mean, there's not any excuses now, but now there'd be like super zero excuses, you know? So we'll see how it goes, man. But yes, Metroid Dread to me, definitely the most important game, one of the most important, if not the most important game Nintendo will have released on the Nintendo Switch since the launch of the system. And I feel that if this game does well, it can open up a whole slew of possibilities when it comes to future IPs and everything, along with what I talked about with Advance Wars, along with what I talked about when it comes to SMT5 and everything. So what are your thoughts when it comes to everything I discussed here? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Check out the links in the description. We've got Twitter. Go and give us a follow on there. Stay up to date on all the latest gaming news and information. Also, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video if you can. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.